I'm Amy Skinner and I'm here with my student Sharon, and we're going to play on the ball today to work on developing a neutral pelvis. So I have my friend Bob here. Bob has the misfortune of being in this condition. We have a pelvis, and if you turn around, I'm going to show you what different pelvic angles look like. Okay, so here's a pelvis, a rotation of the pelvis that's common in women. So if you want to stick your butt back, this is what that looks like. This is a pretty common position for women to take, and it's a dysfunctional position because, hey, Sharon, how does your back feel?
Tight.
Not good.
Yeah.
Painful. So here we have, you can stop doing that now so you don't hurt yourself. These are your seat bones or ischium, and so when you rotate the pelvis backwards, we stick the seat bones backwards. So if we were sitting on a horse, we want those seat bones to be in a nice contact, but when we have rotation here, we actually point the seat bones backwards. So that puts us in a position to be at a disadvantage to communicate directly with the horse. Now this also, if you want to do it just one more time, it lengthens the space of your belly. So it makes your belly longer than your back, and it also causes quite a bit of tension in the low back. So if we look at the SI joints here, they're now compressed, and all the vertebrae in the base of the spine are also compressed. So this is a position that's going to create a lot of problems with shock absorption happening in the low back of the rider, as well as inability to influence the horse's back. The other posture that's common more in men, but some women ride like this, is to rotate the pelvis under. So we see here's the tailbone. So the tailbone would be directly in the horse's spine, causing the back to drop. So if you want to rotate your pelvis there, we see how that's created a collapse through the rib cage, a collapse through the shoulders. This position actually rotates the seat bones forward, and then we have this curve through the upper spine. The rib cage would be dropped down, so we would again not have the ability to engage the rider's core. And in both instances, we actually lose mobility of the leg. So here's where the leg begins. And we lose mobility of the leg, so the rider would be forced to use excess leg pressure and excess hand. So Sharon and I are going to walk through a little exercise to help you develop a neutral pelvis. I'll put Bob down. Sharon, we're going to grab a ball here. All right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just get your feet hip width apart and just get comfortable. And I just want you to play around with being able to roll the ball back and forward. And we're going to play around with different pelvis positions. So you can put your hand on your low back and on your belly, one on each. And it's helpful if you don't know if your pelvis is neutral or not.
Okay.
Do the extreme of each. So stick your butt all the way back, and you feel how more of your belly is in your hand than your low back. Now stick your tailbone all the way forward, and you feel how more of your hand is in your back than your belly. Okay, so let's try to come to the middle, where you have equal amounts of your belly and your hand, your back and your hand. So it should feel comfortable. So you should be able to kind of bounce up and down with ease. Should feel pretty good on your low back. Okay, so now we're going to roll the ball forward and back. You want your pelvis to just be traveling forward and backward in space.
Okay.
So we don't want to be going like this and like that.
Okay.
So we don't want to, and you see how that sways my legs out? We just want to be traveling forward and backward in space, as if we're drawing 11s. Okay, so we're just going to play around with drawing 11s. Should feel pretty comfortable. You should be able to bounce. And you should feel that the ball is easy to roll backward and forward equally. So if I get rotated this way, what I find is that I can't roll backward. I can't roll forward as easily as I can backward. And if I rotate this way, I can't roll backward anymore. I can only go forward. So if I'm neutral, I can go equally forward and backward. Now the simulation here is if you were riding on a horse, you want to be neutral so that you could go forward, stop, or backward with ease, so that you don't get locked behind the motion and your timing isn't right. This is the position that's going to allow you the most mobility to be able to affect the horse's posture with the least amount of leg and hand. Okay, so the other thing we want to pay attention to, and I'll face forward for this one, is if you sit on your hands, you can face forward with me. If you sit on your hands, you can feel where your seat bones are, and you might feel one more than the other. That's pretty normal. So one might have more contact than the other. And you kind of want to play around with getting both seat bones to feel about the same. So again, our feet are about hip width apart. We don't want to be here And we don't want to be here because that's going to lock your hip joint. So your hip joint needs to be free to roll. Okay, so keeping your fingers under your butt, on your seat bones, we're going to roll forward and backward and feel what happens to those seat bones. Now this is where a lot of people notice that they have, I'm going to over exaggerate this, they have a tendency to go forward one direction and backward the other. So we're no longer drawing 11s, we're drawing like a diagonal line. Or some people go forward and backward the same direction. So we want to feel the same amount of mobility in both hips. The glutes are really relaxed, the low back stays nice and flat. And we just roll forward and backward, bringing your pelvis through space, not doing this and this, so we aren't swinging the upper body.
Okay.
So then, once you have that and it feels comfortable, you should be able to have your hands free without it affecting the motion. So your reins would be here, and you could go like, you have your contact, and then you give your contact, and that doesn't make you swing more wildly because you're stable in your low back.
Oh, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas if I tense my low back, then my hands get really unstable and I have to swing my upper body. So you've seen a lot of people when they canter, their arms start to flow up because their hips lock, so their upper body is compensating.
Okay.
So if you're stable here, your arms are able to be much more relaxed and more fluid. And then you can go back to bouncing. So you should be able to go like bounce, you should be able to roll, you should be able to stop. You should be able to go any direction with ease. It's kind of fun, right?
It is. It's interesting.
So this is a really easy, really fun, and actually really comfortable exercise just to play around with to help you find a neutral pelvis position, a nice flat back without tensing up the shoulders. So I like to do this one a lot with my students because it makes everybody laugh, but it also helps you find the right position. So again, you should be feeling that you can roll forward and backward easily without swinging your upper body to do it. You should feel the same amount of you in your hand on your belly as your hand on your low back. And if you're not sure how to find that, it's really helpful to over exaggerate rounding your back and then just pick your sternum up so that you fill your low back with your hand, fill your low back into your hand, and then just raise your sternum up. Because a lot of us women have a tendency to ride like this, and then we don't have the ability to use our core muscles effectively, but we also don't want to get really tight. So a lot of times it might be helpful to just round your low back and raise up your sternum, and then you can roll the ball forward and back with ease. Should be able to breathe freely, and it should be pretty comfortable. So play around with that, and I hope that helps.